Giovanni, and I'm a paralegal here at Lyles Parker. Thank you for joining us for this new webinar series with the Home Care Association of Louisiana. Today's webinar is entitled, What is the Potential Impact of Artificial Intelligence on Your Home Health and Hospice Agencies? This is just a quick reminder. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type them in the question box, and we'll address as many as possible at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I present your speakers, Michael Tobin and Ashley Morgan.
Thank you very much, Gio, and thank you everybody for tuning in this afternoon, early afternoon here, right before the lunch hour. So, artificial intelligence, and specifically generative artificial intelligence, is something that has been a hot topic, of course. It's hard to miss, and Ashley and I are very excited to talk about it today. I know you're all probably excited to hear about it because you can't miss it. Every day in the news it's been there. And it's become a big part of all of our lives as well, I would say. When you are Googling, for instance, doing a search, I'm sure many have noticed the first thing that pops up now is, Gemini's analysis or quick compilation of the search items, the results of that search. And this can be very helpful. It makes it easy to read when you type in a question, how do I make creme brulee or something. You can get that right off the bat, an answer on it, and it's easy to read. It's it's right there for you. It gives you the sources. It makes it easier than it was in the past when you had to Google and search into individual articles about what you were looking for. But that's not without risks at all, to say the least. While it does go into those sources, there's often times where AI, in a way, makes it sound like it's giving you the exact answers that you're looking for. It doesn't go in depth into the resources and can often actually put you on the wrong route, run you astray. And so that's something that we see a lot, actually, in healthcare thus far. So dealing with a lot of our clients, for instance, there's often times where we'll see contracts that were formed with AI, a lot of times interpretations of cases that were generated from AI, or even just discussing an email with the clients. You'll see that they've used AI to help them draft their correspondence. And I will say, AI can often point you in the right direction. It's a helpful tool, but all of these things, all of the sources that AI comes with have to be checked. And so whenever you're using AI in the healthcare context, it is advisable to check with healthcare counsel just so that you can get another set of eyes on, whatever's drafted or whatever legal opinion, quote unquote, is being provided by the AI. Because that's another thing, and we'll get to this throughout the presentation, but when you're getting these opinions from AI, they're not going to be the attorney that's going to back up the research, that's going to have their license on the line. If you run into an issue down the line with information that an artificial intelligence chatbot gave you, they're not going to be responsible for it. I don't even know how you would go about making them liable for it. So that's just one of the things to watch out for, and I wanted to touch on that as we start up this presentation here on artificial intelligence. So with that being said, we'll start out with a little agenda that we'll get to today. We're going to start with just a background of artificial intelligence, how it's been around, and of course been more relevant in recent years, risks and benefits that come from that. We're going to look at AI in Medicare and Medicare Advantage claims review. A lot of what we've been seeing is the use of AI when running these audits from multiple contractors that we see quite often here at Lyles Parker. We'll talk about that a little bit. We'll look at AI regulations and law. It's obviously an evolving landscape, and so these are regulations and laws that are still developing as well. we'll look at AI and data privacy, just to give you an idea of, what are the implications with not only healthcare, but all considerations for AI contracts. As we said, we see those quite frequently. So let's just start off with the background here. So artificial intelligence has been used for decades, and I know it just seems like we've been starting to talk about it as a society of recent, but there's been many places that AI has actually had a hand in thus far. That can be web search engines. As I said, we're making these Google searches, been doing so for pretty much all of my life, been able to do a Google search. And as I said, you look up the question, how to make creme brulee. You would type that in before, and AI would have a hand in bringing you the resources, the articles, to find that information. Now, it just has that summary for you that makes it a little easier to digest. Recommendations on your systems such as YouTube, Netflix, everybody knows that. When you see the recommended for you columns or rows on these streamers, that's based off of what you've previously watched and such. So artificial intelligence has an effect there too. IBM Deep Blue chess programming, the IBM systems. I think it was 10 years ago or something, I was watching IBM on Jeopardy, I believe, and I forget who ended up winning, but I think they put up a very good game of Jeopardy. Siri, Alexa, and other speech-language processors, we know they're always listening in. We know that artificial intelligence is playing into that as well. Instructing, voices, it's supposed to recognize your voice. Artificial intelligence should have an impact there also. So all of these systems have had problems over the years, and as I said, now it's just getting to the point where this generative AI really has taken the forefront, center stage. And so let's head on over to the next slide, talk a little bit more about generative AI. So what it really is a specific form of artificial intelligence that has the ability to generate text, images, other types of media. I think we've all seen it at this point, going on to ChatGPT, for instance, and saying, make me a picture of a duck playing basketball. It can do that very quickly. It's quite skilled at that. And, there's also instances of commercials now that are being made with generative AI too. So they're all over the media. They're all over the news and such. And what it requires is teaching machines with patterns and structure to generate brand new data that's similar but not 100% regurgitation. So it is difficult to get a chatbot to do the same thing twice exactly, or should I say, if you and I both typed in the exact same prompt, we couldn't be sure that it was going to give us the same picture of a duck playing basketball, for instance. What do AI models do? So they can make predictions or decisions when they're presented with new data. And so that is the big way that this generative AI works, is you're getting spreadsheets full of data, far range of outcomes and different industries that can produce these spreadsheets, but essentially, it's a predictor. It looks at all of the past trends and it determines what's going to happen in the future, makes a prediction of what's going to happen in the future, I should say. So like any machine system, the quality of output is going to be directly proportional to the quality of input. So if you're putting in faulty statistics, you're going to be getting faulty statistics back from any chatbot that you're using. So we'll head on to the next slide, continue talking about generative AI in the news. So the Beatles, I hope there's some Beatles fans in here. Great band. not that many fans of the Beatles in my generation, but I can say that I am a fan, and I'm proud of that. So the top 10 hit Now and Then was there was an AI chatbot that recovered John Lennon's voice from 1970s era cassette tape. Now, that's another very interesting thing we'll talk about is copyright. We'll talk about that in a second. But using voices is something AI has become very adept at, and it can make it sound like John Lennon's right there when, obviously he's not. But so other things, 2 chatbots recently played 20 questions back and forth. And they had an in-depth discussion, it sounds like. There was apologies for not understanding answers provided. That's just, another example of, how these chatbots can intuit answers to questions, develop questions based on responses. Programs are being developed for artists to poison images to avoid using content without consent, and that comes into a big topic we'll talk about today, this copyright issue. We see right below that there was a $1.5 billion settlement between authors and Anthropic over alleged copyright violations. So essentially what the issue has been authors having their writings, their books used in order to train artificial intelligence, these AI chatbots. And so, in this case, a federal judge granted approval in 2026 of a settlement, the largest copyright settlement in history, that $1.5 billion. And so, still, this settlement only covers how the works were acquired. So AI output could still be subject to copyright enforcement actions. And, it brings up an interesting concept of, how do you even go about proving that the AI chatbot used your personal creations, your books, when it was training? That's something that can be extremely difficult to do. Obviously lucrative if it can be proven, but that's a big issue with copyright and AI. And I've looked into other copyright and AI issues a little bit. So a lot of times you've got artists that are trying to generate digital pictures using chatbot, maybe a ChatGPT or so. And so they'll go in and prompt up as many times as they need to have the chatbot create, say, a picture of a new revolutionary city or something. And they'll go in and they'll give over and over again different prompts saying, make the buildings taller, make it more sunny and such. Even with that, they've gone to try and get copyright protections and have not been able to. Of the cases that I've seen of recent, it's been very difficult to get your creative works made with AI to get copyright protection. So that's kind of on the other end of the scale with copyright. Just a little tidbit there. All right, so generative AI healthcare news. We got United Healthcare sued for allowing NHPredict, which is an AI tool built by its subsidiary, to improperly deny post-acute care coverage, including skilled nursing and home health, for Medicare Advantage patients. Litigation is ongoing. So we'll talk a little bit more about what contractors, what private payers have been doing with AI, why they've been doing it. I mean, it can be efficient, and we'll touch on those efficiencies. But the theme of this presentation really is that, even with such efficiencies, there are some problems that can be encountered and should be prepared for. What else? We've got ChatGPT authoring a number of blogs in 65 minutes. So 102 blogs in 65 minutes. That is incredibly efficient and nothing that a human could do, but they're full of misinformation related to vaccines and vaping. So input in, input out, when you've got these disinformed blog posts, and you've got a large volume of them, obviously, that's going to be problematic and shows a bit of the worst side of AI. So, there's supposed to be guardrails in place to avoid this. We'll see how that ends up going. I mean, it's all a new system with ChatGPT, with Gemini, Microsoft Bing. So it's going to be trial and error. John Muir Health is integrating generative AI within Epic. So clinicians are recording visits with AI programs, then editing the AI-generated notes. And that is something I'm sure we'll see a lot more of in the healthcare sphere. Having AI, or at least some kind of recording to, document what was said during healthcare visits, and then editing the notes after. That is a good example of probably what clinicians should do, is make sure that everything that was completed by any AI chatbot is accurate. So we'll look now at a couple of cases involving the use of AI. 2024, the Department of Justice subpoenaed several pharmaceutical and digital health companies regarding their use of generative AI in EMR systems to determine whether the tool results in care that is either excessive or medically unnecessary. So we see instances of the DOJ getting involved here. We had a Texas AG settlement with Pieces Technology, which sold a generative AI tool that created documentation of the patient's condition and a treatment plan in the patient's chart. So we've got treatment plans being made by AI. That's probably not going to be good, obviously not in the case of this Texas matter. The tool was marketed as being highly accurate, leading to allegations of false, misleading, and deceptive claims. We see that a lot. The False Claims Act, don't want to be running afoul of that, can be very costly. And that's a good one to be aware of there. 2023, Cigna and United Healthcare sued in class action lawsuits for allegedly using AI algorithms to override treating physicians' medical necessity determinations. So you've got an AI algorithm going against a treating licensed medical physician. That's not going to be good, and that touches upon what I was saying earlier about the culpability of AI. When you get it from AI, they're not going to stand up and say, I've got a license to do this. No. They're not going to take accountability for what was done. And so, on the other hand, you've got treating medical physicians. In this case, that was what overcame. In 2026, we had a Minnesota federal court ordering United Health to produce documents about NH-Predict, post-acute care algorithm in that class action. So even if you've got these big AI chatbots, you may have to show, the gears behind the machine, what's going on. All right. So what's AI have to do with the future in fighting fraud? I would say a lot, probably, based on what we've seen thus far. So to combat improper claims practices, payers are increasingly relying on electronic edits, prepayment reviews, and post-payment audits to ferret out overpayment and instances of fraud. Home health and hospice agencies have seen this firsthand through data-driven TPE, UPIC, SMRC, all different kinds of audits that we see all of the time. So a lot of times you get these audits, you've got records, and a lot of times they'll come to you with the audit based off of what the AI has told it, what kinds of data it's found. And a lot of times humans aren't even looking at these things. It's just going to be, look, you were flagged under this program, and so here's an audit. Now let's see the documentation. Is that necessarily the answer? It can be more efficient, yes, but also room for errors, as we talked about. Nonetheless, it seems like, CMS and its contractors are making a move, certainly towards using artificial intelligence as a part of the attempt to fight fraud here. So these solutions, we're not just talking about them in the future. They're already here, so that's important to know. How about when it comes to traditional Medicare? So the WISER model, recently launched at the beginning of this year. WISER, the Wasteful and Inappropriate Service Reduction Model. This is an ongoing 6-year test using AI and machine learning tools for prior authorization and prepayment review of selected Part B services in traditional Medicare. So prepayment review, more instances of AI becoming involved in that process. And there's 6 pilot states, a few of them listed there, and it applies to dates of service on or after January 15, 2026. Now, home health and hospice benefits are not going to be on the initial service list, but the home is a covered site of service, and the model signals where CMS claim review is heading. So, depending on how this WISER protocol, this WISER model goes, it may very well be headed to the home health and hospice sphere. Some of the states have reported, such as Texas, that only 62% of the requests were initially approved, raised to 84% after physician review. So physicians are still supposed to be reviewing these models, the contractors should be reviewing also what is brought in by these models. Vendors are paid in part based on the savings that they generate. And, this is currently in flux as well. It's important to note, May 2026 it was determined that the WISER model is a rule under the Congressional Review Act, and repeal resolutions are pending in Congress. So just be aware that that's something that some states are a part of right now. Now for Medicare Advantage, AI and utilization management. So Medicare Advantage plans are increasingly using predictive algorithms and AI in prior authorization and coverage decisions. So you can really see how far this AI as a whole is spreading throughout the healthcare industry. The example there, NH Predict, that we talked about, is using patient data such as age, diagnosis, functional status. So a lot of access to the patient data for these chatbots. Talk about a little bit of the HIPAA requirements there later, but to project post-acute care needs, skilled nursing, and home health. So a lot of patient data is available for these AIs. Lawsuits were alleging that the tool is setting rigid recovery timelines that cut off payment for medically necessary care over treating clinicians' recommendations. Again, trying to invalidate the treating clinicians' recommendations, and that most denials are actually reversed on appeal. So upon you put your appeal in, maybe actually get a human to look at it instead of the generative AI, you might be able to get that reversal. That's what the data shows. United Health responds that human medical directors make the final coverage decisions. That is a case-by-case basis, I'm sure, when it comes to, you've got all this AI information coming in, who's going to make the final call? Should be a human, oftentimes probably does not even go to human eyes. But the CMS 2024 MA final rule here, coverage decisions must be based on the individual's patient's circumstances. An algorithm or AI tool cannot be the sole basis for denying or terminating coverage. That makes sense, of course. Had a memo in 2024, CMS frequently asked questions. Algorithms and AI may assist in coverage determinations, but plans are responsible for coverage and non-discrimination compliance. So the practical takeaway really is that, when there's a termination of a home health or hospice based on algorithms, these appeals are frequently overturned, and so just be aware of that. Now we'll move into the next slide where we'll talk about a little bit of autonomous AI, so working more on its own. Autonomous medical coding entails setting up an AI program with all relevant data and language so that it may bill and code entirely independent of human interaction. So that's one that I would say is is coming. It is coming, and it is more relevant in the health sphere. But to say that it can be entirely independent of human interaction, I think that's going to take some time for people to trust any AI to do such things. And we saw just why on the last slide when we're talking about all of these reversals that occur from AI determinations. A coder would be able to review the submissions and should, but only after their creation. Similar autonomous tools are now being marketed to home health and hospice agencies, and after being implemented in a large medical center, one autonomous medical coding platform resulted in 58% reduction in denials, reduced charge processing time, and significant annual cost savings. So when it comes to savings, there are benefits to be had here again, but look back at those reversals. Look at these findings by past AI that have been reversed and try to overrule the treating physician opinion. That's going to show some of the issues here, even with autonomous AI. So we'll head on to the next slide and see that automated coding would use its data set to suggest relevant codes to a human being for billing claims. So a suggestion of codes, that's something more along the lines of the human using it as a tool, working together with the AI, as opposed to a situation where the AI is strictly doing it all by themselves, or by itself, I should say. In that scenario, the AI is utilized similar to how an accountant uses QuickBooks. Rather than setting up the AI and substituting its use for human coders, this method of implementation allows coders to review billing suggestions and accept or deny based on their own understanding of the case in question. So that, again, is more of a using AI as a tool. And I spoke a little bit earlier about when I looked at copyright and the ability to get, for artists online, to get their drawings that they've done with AI registered with copyright protections. I kind of argued that the use of AI in these cases is more of a tool, like an artist using a pen or a director using a video camera. I was trying to say that the real creative energy was in the human, and that they were just using another tool in their tool belt with this AI. Tough argument, I would say, because of the power that AI has, and we're looking at a little bit of that here. But overall, I think this is a good way of using automated AI would be to use it in conjunction or parallel with human interaction, rather than just depending all on the AI. So let's go on to the next slide. Keep it moving here. Some anticipated AI benefits in billing and documentation. Increased accuracy, okay, we can get that. Identify potential coding and documentation errors or inconsistencies. It can be very good at looking through spreadsheets, finding inconsistencies and such, and can try to program out human errors in a way that you couldn't do for a regular human being just looking over this information. But that doesn't mean it's perfect by any means. Efficiency and speed. So a case study of NVIDIA's AI coding program showed drastic cuts in time. We're talking working through cases 85% faster than without the program. So incredible efficiency that is going to be very attractive to businesses going forward. What else will be? Cost savings, of course. Being able to quickly implement changes that are made, hopefully being consistent with how these AI chatbots are used and such. So in terms of data analysis, the algorithms can analyze historical data that predict potential billing issues or trends, allowing healthcare providers to proactively address problems. So that all sounds great. A few more benefits here we can talk about. Scalability, just making it a chatbot or an AI that's available to the your entire company. It allows for continuity. It allows for continuous learning, I think, of both the employees of the company and the AI chatbot itself, ideally. So scheduling is another thing that could be, AI could be helpful with, something easy. Predictive analytics, we talked about looking at past risks, maybe past diagnosis, comorbidities. What if this could help people in the future get treated? And I'm sure it's doing that already. So that's another benefit. It can be custom tailored to the agency as well. So depending on where you get your personal chatbot or tool that you're using, that can be custom tailored to make it easier for your industry as well. So let's talk now about just a few limitations in billing and coding. Complexity of home health and hospice billing. I mean, it's going to take time for any chatbot to be able to go in and determine, for instance, when there's a terminal prognosis. And as we saw, there are issues with that when it comes to overturning the chatbot or AI determinations. So these are complex cases, tons of medical documentation. We see it all the time. Keeping up with frequent updates for coding, that's pretty much going to have to need updating annually, and so the AI is going to have to keep up with that. Data quality and standardization. Ethical and legal considerations, this is a big one. So regarding data privacy, we talked a little bit about that, and security. So there needs to be assurances that this, whatever AI is looking through your medical records, is secure, because it's got all the patient information on it. And that can be extremely problematic if that gets out where it shouldn't be. So that's going to be a big issue. And then overall resistance to change, just a classic human issue there. But things change, and this is the way the world's going right now. So I think everyone is smart to be on this call and learning a little bit more about the changes we are seeing. Other risks: garbage in, garbage out. We talked about that. Without perfect historical data, the error rate may not change. If the AI doesn't know that it's making errors, it will continue doing so. That's problematic. Is AI savvy enough for ever-evolving healthcare rules and regulations? Always. Every week we've got new regulations, new publications coming out, press releases that have huge implications. And so any AI, any tool that's working within the healthcare industry would have to be sure to be able to keep up with those constantly evolving situations. Patient privacy, again, any data entry system, you're going to have risks. Ethical and legal ramifications, especially when AI is used in handling medical records, is going to be an issue. The Brookings Institution wrote, as artificial intelligence evolves, it magnifies the ability to use personal information in ways that can intrude on privacy interests by raising analysis of personal information to new levels of power and speed. So in 1 second, all of your information could be out there for the entire world to see. That is a scary thing, and that is why we need safeguards in place. More, compliance nightmare. How do you audit a machine? Exactly. And more, that goes more into the fact of who's going to be culpable for these tools, the use of these tools. So PHI and PII breach problems. It didn't take long for a breach of ChatGPT Plus to occur. Here's the breaches already. March 2023, hackers were able to break into ChatGPT Plus and gain access to the data of users. What were they seeing? They were seeing first names, last names, email addresses, payment addresses, credit card numbers, just the last 4 digits, but that's fine, right? And expiration dates. In some instances, they were getting access to conversations as well. So I know many people using ChatGPT, many people using ChatGPT Plus. Great way to get some information, but look at that, it gets breached. Italy's privacy watchdog temporarily banned ChatGPT, so obviously some countries are concerned about this, citing the data breach as one of the reasons, as well as questioning OpenAI's use of personal data. So they've got all this data. What are they doing with it? How is it being used? Is your personal data being used to train ChatGPT? I don't think that many people really know except for those at ChatGPT. I don't think many people even at ChatGPT know what's being done. Your information's just out there. The ban was later lifted. Look at that, 15 million euro fine, overturned by an Italian court in 2026. But the European scrutiny does continue. What else do we got under AI risks? The unlicensed practice of medicine. So providers need to ensure that they're not relying on AI to make clinical judgments. Just like the lawyers in my case, when we get a article or a case summary coming from a client that they got with AI, we've got to make sure that we don't just take that, copy and paste it. We've got to go in and actually look, hey, maybe this chatbot did give me a couple of cases that I should be aware of. Let me check them out. Let me use my licensed opinion to figure out if this is really the case. If it is making clinical judgments, the AI, are there evidence-based and clinically sound? So it may not be wrong, and that's certainly not a guarantee. But it needs that additional look, that check. Anti-kickback concerns, so the AKS can't be having remuneration, which is very broad. It can be pretty much value of any kind. It could be tickets to the ball game. It could be reduced rent, but you're not supposed to get remuneration in exchange for referrals to a practice. You're giving an AI developer money or tickets to build an AI for your particular practice. That if it ends up recommending the order of a particular item or drug, you could run into AKS, anti-kickback statute concerns as well. Don't let AI drive the bus and make all the decisions, essentially. Write me a skilled nursing visit note that supports homebound status and medical necessity. That's not the proper use of the tool. You've practiced, you're licensed, you've got to trust your brain sometimes. I think that's a big factor here. All right, so with that, we're going to move on to Ashley, who will discuss a little bit more about the regulations and federal law.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for that wonderful background information and chats about risks and benefits of AI. So as Michael said, now we're going to get into a little bit more drier material. We're going to talk about how the government essentially is responding to AI and some things that you all need to consider if you are going to utilize AI. So first, how is the federal government responding to AI? And there's been a lot of scrutiny. First of all, there's been a National Artificial Intelligence Initiative Act that actually allowed, it was a federal law that allowed for federal agencies to coordinate the use of AI. So we already knew this, but the agencies are using AI. The contractors are using AI. It is permitted. However, there has been other scrutiny as well. There's been executive orders such as Executive Order 14179 in 2025 that resulted in 90 plus federal actions promoting innovation and reduced regulatory burdens. And agencies were instructed to identify and repeal any policies that may hinder AI development or deployment, and also emphasized risk-based regulation and encourage partnerships with the private sector. So, emphasizing risk-based regulation, encouraging partnerships with the private sector. They want to, bring in experts in AI in connection with utilizing AI in government programs. In addition, Executive Order 14365, this actually created a DOJ AI litigation task force to challenge state AI laws and push federal preemption. So they want to limit, the state's regulation of AI and have federal law govern so that there's one essentially governing rule across the country instead of having different regulations across different states. So things are in flux. They change based on administration. Under the Biden administration, there was more scrutiny. More recently, there's been less scrutiny. So things will likely continue to change, obviously, as this is a highly adaptable and changing technology. What are some state laws? We've got two examples here for you. One is in Louisiana. And this applies to Louisiana state government agencies and entities that are under the authority of the Office of Technology Services. But specifically, those state government agencies and entities are prohibited without prior authorization. So it's not fully prohibited, but you have to get prior authorization from entering confidential, proprietary, and restricted state data. So passwords, credit card numbers, health records, big one, into commercially available AI systems. And they're also prohibited from using AI to independently make business decisions, including the following categories, like enrollment, employment, program eligibility, finances, legal, regulatory compliance, law enforcement, welfare, pretty much everything that the government does, right? So the Louisiana government is specifically prohibited under this law from utilizing AI unless it receives prior authorization. Colorado actually also issued an AI Act, but this was then, it was issued and then it was repealed and replaced. So again, these laws are constantly in flux. It was a really comprehensive state AI law that never took place and then was subsequently replaced by a narrower transparency focused law that's supposed to become effective in January 2027. This is still going to cover healthcare decisions. So a lot of these laws are obviously focusing on privacy, and healthcare privacy is a big issue. But again, all of these state laws are in flux due to that recent executive order that's saying that it's going to preempt all state laws, which means the federal rule is the governing rule. So because we are talking healthcare, there are a number of laws that apply to healthcare data. I know many of you are familiar with a number of these. We've got the Privacy Act of 1974 that applies to federal government agencies. We have HIPAA in 1996, HITECH in 2009, the 21st Century Cures Act. The FTC actually has laws regarding healthcare. The breach notification of data is not covered by HIPAA. It's covered by the FTC. Substance abuse protections. And then the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, or more commonly known as GINA, that was passed in 2008. So there's lots of laws that apply to healthcare. So that's why we need to be very careful when we're utilizing AI in connection with healthcare to make sure we're not violating any of these rules or any state laws too, because states all have their own individual laws as well in regard to healthcare privacy. So in addition to worrying about being in compliance with state and federal law, we also have to think about malpractice concerns if we're going to be using AI. AI tools are, they're typically about black box. You type in your prompts and you receive information back, but you don't really know what's behind the AI that's helping it, give you the feedback. Do you have informed consent of the patient? It's really important that if you are going to use AI, whether that's, simply in the assistance with the generation of your notes, your narratives, or in more complex ways as well, you need to make sure that you have a separate consent for your patient to the use of AI. And you have to think about what's the standard of care. We have to make sure we're not letting the AI drive the bus, drive the clinical decision making. We need to make sure that our providers are still using their own clinical decision making in connection with patient care. There's also a concern that there might be bias in the system because the AI is only as good as the information that's being put in. We don't know what was put in to drive the AI. All humans are unique individuals. So if it's, been based on the healthcare information for men, for example, and you're treating women, there might be a bias there and it might miss things. So again, we need to make sure that we're not just relying on AI to make clinical decisions. It can be a big malpractice concern. If a licensed professional is going to be using AI, you need to take responsibility and make sure you're able to scrutinize or deny the AI outputs. There was a case out of Alabama in 2023, Sampson versus Heartwise Health Systems. And in this case, a clinic software-based cardiac screening program classified a young adult with a family history of congenital heart defects as normal. And then he subsequently died a couple months later of an undiagnosed congenital heart condition. The Alabama Supreme Court reversed summary judgment in this case, which allowed fraud and certain negligence claims to proceed. So, very important that if we're using AI, we're still using our own clinical judgment, making our own decisions, reviewing what that AI is suggesting and making sure it's correct and that we agree with it. If the AI is making decisions, who enforces the standard of care? They're still going to come after the doctors for now. They're not going to go after the AI companies. They're still going to go after your clinical licenses. What if the wrong output is used? Are humans able to detect the errors before a patient is harmed? It's all things that need to be considered. What is the potential harm for a patient if you're using AI to generate a potential diagnosis? It can cause, significant possible harm if the patient's diagnosed incorrectly. And how often is the AI software that you're utilizing updated? That's something you really need to know, because we all know, and as Michael said before, AI is, if it's garbage in, it's garbage out. So we need to make sure that it's updated and accurate. Some additional concerns regarding privacy and data security. So for privacy, you need to think about where the data is being maintained. Where are the servers? That's a big issue. There's a lot of states, especially state Medicaid programs, that prohibit having health information overseas. So you need to make sure you know where, if you're using an AI tool, where is it storing that data. You also need to make sure it complies with HIPAA, and don't just take the company's word for it. You need to have assurance from them. You need to be including that in your security risk analysis. You should have a BAA in place with them. What's going to happen if there's a breach? Is the company, what's your contract say? What's the indemnification clauses? All things that you need to think about when you're entering into these agreements. Patients also have rights in some states to know that AI is being used. I don't know if this will become a national standard, but you need to know what the rule is for your state. And if patients, have a right to know that AI is being used, you need to make sure you're disclosing it. In my personal opinion, best practice, whether or not it's required, I think it's a good idea to let the patients know that AI is being used and that you have a separate consent. For data security issues, you need to see what cybersecurity protections are in place. Do they carry separate cybersecurity insurance? And do you have, as a company, have sufficient cybersecurity protections in place? Have you done a security risk analysis? Have you considered the AI in your security risk analysis? Do you have specific policies and procedures on these issues? And are you training your staff to also think about these issues and to report any problems to you so you can investigate them? Some additional concerns regarding coding. If you're going to be using AI for coding, this can cause inaccurate predictions or misinterpret medical data. Again, we already talked about medical malpractice, but there can be certainly medical malpractice issues if you're coding something incorrectly, especially if you're selecting the wrong diagnosis code based on an AI suggestion. Is there potential for false claims? I mean, I certainly think that the government's position is likely going to be to still go after the doctor or the treating provider for false claims, even if the AI has been selecting what the codes are. In regard to data integrity, you need to think about what is the source of the training data for the AI system you're using. Again, is there a bias? And you need to be aware of that if there is, so that your providers are aware and can correct appropriately. And what are the knowledge cutoff dates? Is it constantly being updated, or is it only updated as of when you purchase that AI system? So in regard to contracts with AI companies, if you are in, there's a lot of companies out there marketing their AI tools. It's the hot item of the recent times. Everybody's got an AI component that they want to sell you. So if you're going to enter into one of these contracts, you want to first consider the scope of the work and the deliverables to be provided. So what is the AI tool actually even supposed to do? Does the product description that they're trying to market to you, does it actually accurately describe what their AI tool does? And does that description meet your needs? Is it even something that you need to have right now? You don't necessarily need to have AI at this point in time. You might not need it in your practice. You also need to see what kind of documentation is available. What kind of, do they have papers to show the work that they're doing? Do they have a potential BAA in place? Do they have insurance? All those kinds of things. What inputs are required for the AI? What are they requiring from you for the AI tool? And what are the potential outputs and deliverables based on the information that's being put in? You need to know what the scope is of the tool. What is it able to access? What is it able to produce? How much does it touch? Again, are there biases in the data and the outputs? This is a big issue in regard to healthcare because it's only being trained on a subset of issues. So you need to know if it's going to have a biased output because of how it was trained. What are the risks to using the tool? I would certainly ask the company that. What risk do they anticipate? What are the likelihood of errors? And I would see if they can provide you with some examples and data to back that up, the responses that they give you. And is your use case permitted? Are you actually able to use their tool to achieve what you want to achieve by using the AI tool? You also want to consider intellectual property rights. Who owns the inputs? Who controls what happens to the inputs? If you are providing that information, does that stay your information or is that going to become the company's information that they use for all of their other clients? So that's something you really need to consider because you don't necessarily want your data just going out being used for everybody else. So very, very important question. So you need to make sure you're not giving up ownership of the inputs by using the tool itself. In addition, you need to consider trade secrets and confidential information. If you're not going to have a trade secret, obviously, over your health information if you're providing health information from your patients. But if you have a specific way that you code or bill claims, and that's being used in the AI system, that's something you want to think about. Who owns the outputs and deliverables? If you end up terminating the contract later on down the road, do you still maintain access to all of the outputs that have come from that AI tool? Are you still able to use them in the future however you want, or are there restrictions on that? Something else to consider is who owns the algorithm or the program. Do you own it or does the company maintain ownership? And if you want to change the process or the outputs, is that something that they're able to accommodate? And how is that done? How much time does it take? Is there any training information or usage information? What happens to that information? Do they record it and use it for subsequent purposes or internal training? Is the tool proprietary or open source software? Meaning, is it a closed system that is drawing from just a unique subsection of data, or is it open to the full internet? And do you need any special licenses to use the AI tool, or is it just available to anyone? Some additional considerations for performance and service. What's the tool's availability? You need to establish some standards in connection with that. Is it going to be available to everyone or just to certain people at your company? Are there maintenance or downtime expectations for when the AI is being updated? You need to know that up front if you're not going to be able to use it, especially if you're using it to create treatment notes, for example. How do you address quality concerns? This is really important. We all know about AI hallucinations. So very, very important that the company is able to give you a satisfactory answer on how quality concerns are going to be addressed and how quickly those concerns can be addressed. I would certainly establish quality metrics and tracking metrics. You should incorporate this into your risk assessment and into your internal reviews to make sure that you're auditing the AI and making sure you're getting the information that you want. Also ensure that the tool allows you to comply with your professional licensure obligations, your internal policies, and any other regulatory requirements. So you need to make sure you have a solid contract with these companies. Don't just sign whatever contract they put in front of you. You need to actually review it and read it. I wouldn't just run it through AI and ask AI, what it flags in the contract. I would hire an attorney to help you review that contract and make sure you're properly protected, especially as a healthcare provider, especially if PHI is going to be input into this AI system. You need to make sure it has all the appropriate representations and warranties. So, for example, that the vendor has the necessary rights, licenses, and permissions to use the software and programs that they're using, that they have the right to grant the user, the rights that are actually covered by the contract. Do they actually even have the authority to allow you to use the data that's being used to create the AI and the outputs? The vendor is agreeing that it's not going to violate any laws or regulations, including privacy laws, and the vendor is not going to violate or infringe upon the intellectual property rights of others. You also want to look at limitations on liability. Are they putting any limitations on that? And if so, you need to know that, and you certainly need to have reciprocal ones. And again, what are the payment terms? Can you withhold or delay payment if there's an issue with the implementation or the quality isn't meeting your standards? Or are you still going to be on the hook? And are you on the hook for the entire contract period, or can you terminate due to issues with performance? Some risk management questions you should ask is the AI tool even going to integrate with your other tools, with your EMR or your coding software? If they're separate, with both, how is it going to integrate? Does it work well together? I would certainly demo that before you just sign on for a year or longer of usage. Identify which party is responsible for what kind of failure. So, if it's an issue with the AI, is the AI company going to take control of that? Is your EMR company going to get involved? Those are all questions you need to think about at the forefront before you start launching these programs. You also want to clearly identify who is responsible for cybersecurity. Remember HIPAA, the AI vendor is likely a business associate. You need to have a BAA in place. You need to require prompt notification of a breach so you can take the correct response in connection with that. I said this previously, but I would absolutely audit this tool. I would audit the tool itself to make sure you're getting the information you want out of it and that the information you're getting is correct. Also make sure you're maintaining documentation regarding risk identification and management, and that you have cyber liability insurance in place. So some compliance steps to think about. You should absolutely be doing an ongoing review of the applicable regulations. Like I said, these rules are constantly changing. They vary by state, and depending on what happens at the federal level, there may be, federal preemption, but these things are still very much fluid and changing all the time. If you have not done an NIST security risk assessment, there are AI risk management resources available. I encourage you to take a look at those. Make sure you've got a contract with AI developers that is compliant and that is satisfactory in your eyes, and make sure their AI model integrates well with your EMR and coding software. If you're using AI, does your liability insurance have coverage for that? And if you're using AI, you need to make sure you have an internal policy and procedure on AI use and that your staff is actually trained on it. A few additional thoughts. Artificial intelligence is evidential. It's not existential. You don't want machines to run your life or kill you, so don't ask them to. You should be using this as a tool to assist you in carrying out your daily tasks, or in treating patients, or in coding procedures, or in billing. You should not be allowing it to do everything. You should be in control of that technology and how it's being utilized. Any document that's generated using AI only represents the quality of the data that was used to generate it. So again, if it's been built on poor data, it's going to give you poor outputs. It's really important that you that you have scrutiny in connection with whatever is being output from an AI tool. We've always stated that each document encounter must be unique. AI documentation needs to meet this standard. You don't want cloned documentation from the AI. If it's pulling from all the same information, is it going to clone a bunch of notes? That's going to be a problem. Any AI document generated should clearly represent the clinician's clinical decision making rather than regurgitated, machine jargon. You want to make sure that it is reflecting the actual clinical judgment from a provider. So in conclusion, remember that AI works on probabilities. Are all of those applicable to your situation? These tools are still developing. You don't have to implement AI right now. You can wait until more tools are developed and then compare the alternatives. Please remember that your professional and general liability and cyber liability insurance needs to cover these tools if you're utilizing them. And always remember that HIPAA still applies. So you need to ensure that patient information is protected if you're going to use these tools and allow it to have access to patient information. So we appreciate you all for joining us today. We hope you learned a little bit. And if we have any questions, Gio, we're happy to address those now, or y'all can reach out to Michael and I. Our contact information is on the screen. We're also happy to address them offline as well.
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, there's no questions or concerns as of right now. So I'm gonna just close up. So thank you to our presenters, Michael and Ashley, for that information, and thank you to our attendees for joining us today. I will also be sending a copy of the PowerPoint slides tomorrow, and if you have any further questions, please reach out to Michael or Ashley or the law firm. Other than that, have a great Tuesday. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.